So far, when we add any data here and we add items to our order and then we refresh the page, we lose both our menu items here as well as our order. So what we want to do is when we load in some fishes or when we create a new fish or when we update the fish, we want to save that to a database so that when I come back to it at a later point in time, or when somebody actually visits our store, that data needs to be available to them. So we're going to be using a service from Google called Firebase, and Firebase is awesome because it's super easy to get up and running. It's really intuitive for JavaScript developers. And most of all, it is real time, meaning that if I update any piece of data on our application that is in Firebase, it will automatically relay that to everyone else who has the store open. It uses a technology called WebSockets, which is part of HTML5, and WebSockets allow us to do real time rather than using like an Ajax where we ping the database for changes. So I just want to show you an example of how Firebase works. So I have my answer going up here, and as I refresh, it's going to give me a random one. And if I go over to my Firebase database here, you can see that this is my database. And then underneath that, we're going to have all of our stores. And that looks like somebody, I just deleted this, but somebody else must be trying the demo out on the website because they just created that. Now, as soon as I visit the store, you see what happens is it updates handsome, helpless nuclei, and open it up. And there is only an owner, which we're going to be using that for authentication. But as soon as I load some sample fishes in, you'll see that that data is automatically relayed to Firebase. So we got fish 1 through 9. And then as I add them to the order is not going to be, we're going to be using something called local storage for that. But what's kind of neat about that is as soon as I make a change, let me zoom out on this so we can see. As soon as I make a change to Pacific halibut, maybe say Atlantic, you see that it's obviously updating right here. It's updating right here, and it's updating right here, which is great because that's updating our state. But the state is also being mirrored to our Firebase, right? You can see it says Atlantic halibut. So that means if I change it to West halibut and hit enter, you see that that data automatically updated and is now mirrored over to our Catch of the Day application right here and right here. Similarly, if I were to open this up in maybe Safari, you can see that I can't log in because I'm not the owner of that. And that's what we'll go over in our authentication episode. But it says West halibut. Now, if I were to change this again to Cool halibut and hit enter, it updated it both in Safari as well as in every other browser that currently has this item open, which is amazing. So let's get started with that. What I need you to do is to sign up. Go to firebase.google.com and sign up for an account, or just log in with your Google account. I need you to make a new project. So we're going to go ahead and add a new project here, and you can call that Catch of the Day. And then you can put your name in there because there's going to be lots of us with it. So West Boss, I've done this a couple times. So I'm going to put 2 on it, and it's going to give you a nice project. Then you can decide where the data is going to go, and we can create the project. Now, while that is creating, let's go into our actual application here, and we're going to create a new file called base.js. And this is not going to go in the components folder. It's not a component. It's going to go directly in our src file. So call this base.js, and no capitals or anything on that one. And then inside of this, we need 2 packages. So first, we're going to import something called rebase. And that's going to be from a package called re-base. And that's going to allow us to, it's like a React Firebase specific package that's going to allow us to mirror our state to our Firebase changes. And then we also need the official Firebase package from Firebase. And that's what we're going to be using for anything that is not just mirroring to state. And when we set up rebase, we actually have to pass it our Firebase. Now, inside of that, we need to configure our application. So I say const Firebase app is equal to firebase.initialize app. And then inside of that, we need to go back to our application here that the project is now ready. So we're going to click on continue. And Firebase has a couple of different items in it. They have auth, which we're going to use. They have a database, real-time database, which we're going to use. And they also have the ability to host your application there and maybe store files and do something called serverless function. So we're not using those 3 ones in this tutorial. We'll just be using the auth and the database. So click on the database that you got here. And we're going to click on the get started. We're just looking for some sort of authentication. And by default, Firebase puts some auth on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily disable that authentication until we get to those videos. So let's go over to our rules here. And you're going to change these to read, true, write, true. And that's going to open up all of the security rules. Obviously, you would never do that in a production application. We're going to be coming back to that. But for now, let's just open it right up so that we can get prototyping. And we'll go ahead and publish that. And next, what we need to do is get that configuration. We need API keys and auth domain and whatnot. So that is available if you go to project overview and it says get started here. We are doing a web app. So you click on that and it's going to give us the config that we need. So let's just copy. We don't need everything, just this object right here. Copy that. Go ahead and, I'm going to take these away and I'll paste it in there. We actually really only need a couple things. So we need the API key. We need the auth domain. And we also need the database URL. We can get rid of these things right here because we're not specifically using them. Good. Now what we need to do is create our rebase. So we'll say const base is equal to, say rebase.create class, and then we will pass it, capital C on there. We pass it our Firebase app.database, and database is a function that will return the actual database that we have. Good. Now, so we've created two things here. We've created our Firebase app and we've created our rebase bindings. And then we need to export them from here. So we're going to say export curly brackets Firebase app. And that's going to, this is what here, let's do a little comment. This is a named export, because remember let's go order.js. Remember when we imported format price? That was a named import. We knew what it was called. And this is a named export. And then we're also going to say this is a default export. So the main thing that gets exported from this base.js config file is our base that we've created with rebase. So we'll say export default base, and that's going to allow us to bring it into our other files. So that's good. We can close all these files down. Now what we need to do is go back into our app.js, and we need to now mirror our fish state over to what is our Firebase. And in order to do that, we need to sort of like wait until this app component is on the page, and then we'll start to sync them up. So this is where we're going to start getting into what are called lifecycle methods. And lifecycle methods in React are, if you're used to jQuery, you know that we have like a document ready, and that's when the page is ready to go, or you have like a window on load, and that's when all the images have been downloaded. In React, we have all kinds of lifecycle methods that essentially tell us when certain things are happening. And the one that we're going to be using is called component did mount, and component did mount is sort of like a hook into the very first possible second that the application is loaded onto the page. In our case, this specific app component. So you can take a quick look here at all of the React lifecycle methods. There's the constructor, which we talked about. There's component will mount, render, component did mount. And then there's a whole bunch for updating. Should component update, component will update. We'll go over a couple more of these in specific use cases, but definitely take a look at the docs for all of the different lifecycle methods that we have. So we're going to go into our app here, and above our custom methods, we're going to add a component did mount. And let's just do a console log mounted. Let's just double check that that's still firing. Open it up. Yeah, we get our app.js console logging mounted. So now that we know we're in good shape, what we're going to do is import our Firebase. So say import base from up a level, and then that is just going to be from the base.js file. And then in our component did mount, we're going to say this.ref is equal to, and this ref is different than the actual input refs that we were talking about earlier. Refs in Firebase are the sort of the reference to a piece of data in the database, and we'll talk more about that in the future. And I'll say base.syncState, and we're going to sync this with, it's going to be not with the entire database, because it's unnecessary. Let me go back to my database and show you Let me go back to that other one that I was working with and go to database. So all this data here, we don't necessarily care about king or uptight jealous women or jealous helpless cacti, because that's not our data for this specific store. We just care about the handsome helpless nuclei, right? So we're going to sync it with the name of the store. And where do we get the name of the store in app? Well, let's go back here. Let's look at it. Quaint defeated people. And if we look at our app component, you'll notice that we have props from React Router. React Router is going to give our props, and in match, there's going to be something called params, and then there's going to be a store ID, and that will give us quaint defeated people. That will give us whatever is in the actual URL. So we'll sync it with, and we'll put the params in there. This.props.match.params.store ID. And that seems a little bit long. That is probably true. So what we can do is we can destructure that out into its own variable. We'll just name it params. So above, we'll say const params is equal to this.props.match. And then we are able to grab the params.store ID in there, and then /fishes, right? Because even inside of our catch of the day, if we're inside of one of these specific, we don't care about the owner just yet. We're going to be going into that, but we care about the fishes, not the anything else. So that's why we do /fishes. That's kind of cool thing about Firebase is as you get deeper in nested objects, you just do // and that helps you go deeper. So that is the ref to / the store name / the actual fishes object, which will contain and mirror our state. Good. And then the sync state also requires an object of some options. The first one is context is going to be this, and the state that we're going to sync is going to be fishes, right? It's not going to be our order state. We're going to be syncing our fish state. So if I give that a save, now I can close this out. If we go to our application and we go to our database, I'm going to look at it, get started. So there's nothing in there, but if I load some sample fishes, boom, look at quaint defeated people, fishes, all of that data is now being synced. And if I change Pacific Halibut to Atlantic and go back, woo, it has changed as well. So isn't that amazing that just this much code is able to sync our state? We don't have to do any updating and whatnot. So I really like this package for syncing state between Firebase and our state. Now, what we also have to do is that we are now listening for changes on here. But if I were to go back and then go into another one called the West store and visit that one and load in some fishes, now what I've done is I've created two stores. However, we unmounted the application by going back to the store picker, and then we remounted it by going forward. And if your user were to do that multiple times, what happens is you are sort of listening for changes every single time, but you're never unlistening for changes. And that can lead to what's called a memory leak in the future because you forgot to actually kind of clean up after you left that store. So that's exactly what we need to do. We're going to be using another lifecycle method called component will unmount. And that is as soon as the component is unmounting. So console log unmounting. And so here we go. Now, if let's go to this page, I visit a store, and then I go back, you see that it says unmounting. Why? Because that triggered an unmount because the app component is no longer showing. And then we simply just need to take our base package and remove binding of this.ref. And that's exactly why we stored the reference to the database in this.ref so that when we leave, we can remove it. Beautiful. So I'm going to visit the store, and then when I go back, it's going to unmount it for me and clean up any memory issues that may have. Beautiful. So now when we load the page, load some sample fishes, and I refresh the page, you see that after a split second, the fish are immediately reinstated into my store because they are now being persisted in our database. One last thing, you probably see this Firebase warning, invalid query segment. I did look this up, and it's just an issue with the current Firebase package. Once they've already fixed it on GitHub, and once they push that, it should no longer be an issue. So if you do see this, you're taking it in the first couple days after I release it, you can safely ignore that.